Yeah, good morning, everyone. So, in our previous class, we learnt about the events. So, in React, in order to understand two-way binding, we need to learn about event binding. So, React implicitly doesn't support two-way binding, and to handle two-way binding, we have to manually implement through event binding. And in React, event binding. In event binding, we learnt about few important points. First, we discussed about what is event, and we discussed about what is event handler. So, and we have to know one more. I explained, that is what is event listener. Today, we will make a note about this event listener. What is this event listener? Already I told you. Generally, event follows which design pattern? Event follows a software design pattern called observer. Observer is a pattern. And event have two basic components. One is sender, another one subscriber. What is sender? Sender defines actions to perform, trigger, it's a trigger. And subscriber defines the actions to perform. Sender sends notification and subscriber will perform the action. Actually, event uses a delegate mechanism. What is delegate? A function pointer. Delegates are function pointers. So what is event handler? A event handler defines the trigger and the functionality to perform. So event defines only trigger. Event handler defines both trigger and functionality. What is event listener? Event listener allows to configure events for any element which is dynamically created, or you can dynamically add event to any element by using event listeners. So what is event listener? This is important point here. So event listener configures event for element dynamically. Event listener configures event for element dynamically. So JavaScript uses add event listener method for configuring event. JavaScript uses add event listener method for configuring event. First, we are going to learn all the points about event. Then we will learn how it is used in React. First, if you know all these in JavaScript, then we can implement in React. So in JavaScript, so you know about event handler, and another one is event listeners. So syntactically, we define like this. Suppose we have a document dot create element. It is a button, and to this button we need to add inner HTML is insert. It is JavaScript syntax. First we will see what is it, then we will use it in React. So event and callback function. So here in this case, event can be click, change, blur like that. So this is event listener. So how do we define event and how to configure the event listeners? These terms are important to understand. Handler and event listener. Next, this already I explained. So I showed you how to add events and define events. For your example, I will copy this. This is example of a HTML page, general HTML page where we write the event. First, after knowing all these, we will implement this in our React. First, we need to know all the basic of events, right? So next, once you know what is event handler and event listener, I hope you already know event arguments. So what are event arguments? What are event arguments? In JavaScript, what are event arguments and what is their purpose? Usually, event arguments, event arguments comprises of payload. Event arguments comprises of payload. So which is data about element and event sent to subscriber. Event argument comprises of payload. Payload is nothing but the data carried from one place to another. In computer programming technologies, payload refers to data carried from one place to another. So data can be carried from one place to another using the payload. Event arguments define the payload. In general, JavaScript events, two arguments are present. Actually, JavaScript events support one is default arguments, another one is custom arguments. JavaScript event supports default arguments and custom arguments. So what is the data carried, transported is important. For example, here just a basic thing I will show. Suppose we are having a function insert click. Now in this insert click, so this is a button on click is insert click. So here we have button and we have event. That means we have two options here. We have element and we have an event. We have element and event. Now what happens is this insert click, this is insert click function. This insert click function have to know about this button. That means when user clicks a button, that function should know what is the button, right? That means what is the button means what. So they have to know what is the button. Button means what is a button, what is the button ID, what is the button name, what is the button type, all these details we need to understand. So here we are having one option like, let's say, yeah. So we are having a function insert click and we have a button that is having a on click is insert click. Usually this button have lot of details. Button have lot of details like ID, name, class. How a function knows about the button details? Which button is clicked? What is its ID? What is its name? What is its value? We need such information several times because one event function can be used by several buttons. That means already in JavaScript, a event can be triggered with several functions. So several elements can use one function. That means, for example, we have buttons like button like insert, button like update, and button like delete. Now to handle these three buttons, you don't need three functions. You can have only one function which can manage all three buttons. Already in JavaScript, if continuous operations are required, we don't write individual events. Only one handler, one function will be there. It will be used by several handlers. That means we will not write three events. We will write only one function called database. And this one function will be used by all three buttons on click database. So on click database, all on click, right? So all three buttons are using the same function. We don't write three different functions. We write only one function which will be used by all three. Then how the function knows which button you clicked? Because on insert it will do insert work, on delete it will do delete work, but function is only one. Why we will not write three functions? Because if you are doing continuous operations and we need to carry data from insert to update, update to delete, we will not write three functions. Any function individual scope will be there. Data of one function is not accessible to another. That is the reason in one function we have to use global variables. Instead of that, what we do is we create one function for all three. Then how the function knows which button you click? Whether you clicked insert or update or delete, which button you clicked, how the function knows. So that is because through these event arguments. And usually in JavaScript there are two default event arguments. What are those default event arguments? Default event arguments are, every function have two default event arguments. Event arguments are, one is this, another one is event. What is this? It sends information about the current element. Event, it sends information about the current element. Sorry, current event. Information about element is sent by this, and information about event is sent by event. Every event have two default arguments. One is this, another one is event. So without knowing these basics of JavaScript events, you cannot handle events in React. So these are all general basics of events in JavaScript. Event handlers, listeners, and arguments. Without that, you cannot do anything in React events. First, you should know perfectly about JavaScript events. Those you will understand how to handle now. So here, what is the purpose of this? For example, this button is having an ID as insert, btn insert. It is having a value called insert. This button have an ID called btn update, value as update. This button have an ID called delete, btn delete, and we have a value called delete. Now, how the function knows which button you clicked? So into that event, you can pass the argument this. What this is going to do is, this is going to send, it is going to send information about this element to the function. That means what it will do, it can send the ID into this, it can send the value into this. So you can access by using the this event argument. And you know, this is an actual parameter. There you need a formal parameter in function to collect it. So we will create an object here as btn or button. That means this refers to button, and through that you can access all the details. For example, just I'm using document.write button id, and I can access as button.id. So I will have value. I want to access button dot what value. And you can see that this is going to access the button related details. When I click any button, that button detail will come. When I click any button, the button detail will come. Now we exactly know which button is clicked. So these are event arguments. In event argument, what is the purpose of this? It sends information about current element. There is another event argument. So we can use another event argument, that is event, comma event. You can use another event argument event. There is no order dependency. You can write first event, after that this. But the keywords are important. This is a keyword, event is a keyword. You can't write anything else. So these keywords are important, and order anyway. You just use only event, or you just use only this, or you use both. Anything you can give. Now we need a formal parameter here for event E. So what this is going to do? This is going to send information about button, and event is going to send information about event. What is information about event? Event is click. What is information about event is event have lot of details like how you clicked, where you clicked, with which button you clicked, everything. Everything matters. That means, for example, what happens is you are using some click. Suppose what happens, a pop-up will come. Just for example, I think we already designed one example. Yeah. So you know already in Bootstrap and all, for example, what happens? Suppose we have a window. In this window, a simple pop-up will come with a close. Now to close this pop-up, we have a mechanism. You can click here outside the pop-up, then pop-up will close automatically. That behavior will be there for models. That means you click outside, then the pop-up will be closed. We call this as backdrop closing. Backdrop closing means you don't need to close the button. So you just click outside, it will be closed. Now, how it knows that you clicked outside? How it knows that you haven't clicked inside this box? How it knows that you clicked outside the box? That means it is not just identifying that you clicked, it is also identifying where you clicked. X axis, Y axis, is it in the scope, outside the scope? And not only that, for example, suppose I'm having some http colon double slash w.amazon.in .in. This is a website address I given. And when I move the mouse onto it, it says that control plus click, you can open this link. So generally, I thought that click means only click, but it is saying that with the control key you click, I will open in a separate window. How it knows that you used control key or not? That is all JavaScript. Na? In JavaScript, we can verify whether control is used or not, alt is used or not, shift is used or not. We learn about various event arguments. That means event arguments will tell whether which key you pressed. You clicked with control key or without control key. How you can get all that information? That is done by using which one? Event. So what this is going to send, actually, this payload contains details like ID. So like ID, name, class name, value. It depends on src, href, which element you are using depending on that element. If you are writing for image, it will have src. You are writing for link, then it will have href, depending on which element you are using. And event payload contains details like, so what are the event related details like client X? So client X, client Y, CTRL key, alt key, shift key, like this. It have a lot of other details, even key code, char code, which key. Those are all event arguments. So when any element event triggers, element related details you can send using this. Event related details you can send by using event. So here I'm using another event argument E. Here I will put as X position. How to get X position E dot what? Client X. How to get control key used or not? CTRL key. I will use E dot CTRL key. These are the event arguments. That means we have two parameters. One collecting information about the element through this. Another is collecting information about the event through this, the event. And when I click on this, and you can see, let's remove this one. Yeah. And you can see here, delete, then you see X position is 137. Suppose I am clicking in the beginning somewhere here, then it is 124. And control key is not used. Suppose I will press control key and click delete button. Then it says control key is used. It will return a boolean true or false. These are general basic things that you know in JavaScript. How to send information about event and how to send information about the element. And once we get the information, we write actions actually. What we do here, we generally write a simple switch we will write. In the switch, we pass the button. Button dot what? Button value. And we write a case. If case is what? Insert. Then document dot write, we say record inserted. That means insert related actions we define here. And we configure a break, a case. And what is it? It is update. And what action? Document dot write record updated. And we have delete, case delete. And that means function is only one, but actions are different. Deleted successfully. Okay, that is the break. That means now what happens? Only one function is present, but working for three buttons. On update, it says updated. On insert, it is inserted. On delete, it is deleted. We don't write several functions. We write only one function which can manage all. That depends on how you define the event arguments. You can pass current element details and you can pass the event related details. So here syntactically how you do that. So we have a function that is insert click something roughly. We have obj and we have e. Through obj you can access name. Through obj you can access just roughly you can access value. Through obj you can access id, and through e you can access x, client x. Through e you can access client y. Through e you can access ctrl key, like this. And usually in the button insert click. So that means on click is equal to insert click. Into that we have this, another one is event. Like this, we are having some details. So it is not having a value and you are collecting the value. Obviously, you know it will return undefined if the value is not there. How JavaScript passes the event arguments and how JavaScript collects the event arguments. How you transport data to that subscriber. So these are default arguments. Event have default arguments which are this and event. Event can have custom arguments also. So next point is event can configure custom arguments. It supports it supports any type of arguments. Any type of arguments. Any type of arguments. That means it can be primitive or a non-primitive. And another important is you can configure custom arguments, whether it may be primitive type argument or a non-primitive. It also supports spread and rest approach. In JavaScript, you learned about spread operator and rest operators. JavaScript spread operator and rest approach you can use in the same way here. So event have default arguments and custom arguments. Currently here I'm using the default arguments. These are default arguments. One is this, another one is event. Instead of default argument, let's clean up this here. Yeah. Instead of default arguments, what you can do is, suppose we are having a function called details and we have a button as product, or say get details. Get details is a button and button uses an on click. On click is details. We are pointing towards the function. And here I can pass an ID, I can pass a name, so I can pass a boolean, I can pass a array, so I can pass here an object. Rate is 4.5 like this. That means event allows to pass custom arguments. You can pass your own arguments. Default arguments by using this keyword, another one by using event. You can pass your own arguments, custom arguments. How do you collect? You use your spread rest approach. You learned rest parameters na, in JavaScript. Dot 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 product that refers a rest parameter. This rest parameter will have all the data which you can. Rest parameter is an array type parameter, you know. And what we do, we create ID, name, and stock, and cities, and rating. All this we assign through the product. You know, this is the destructuring technique of array in JavaScript. So rest parameter data is collected and stored in individual variables. And we can present them. Document.write. I want to know the rating. then what we do, rating is equal to, that is rating dot rate. That's it. You want other details, that means you want the cities. So that is, we can access the cities. That is, cities is an array. And you want the name, and we can access the name here. And you can see, you can send your own details. So these are custom arguments. And you know in JavaScript how to pass custom arguments, how to collect them, and how to use them. It can be any type of argument. You can individually collect them instead of REST. This is a REST approach. In JavaScript functions, you have REST parameters and spread. This is the REST approach, how you pass the data and how do you collect. And you can pass along with other parameters also. But you know the rules of REST parameter. REST parameter, what rules you learned in JavaScript? Every function can have only one REST parameter, and REST parameter must be last parameter in the formal list. These are the rules that you learned about REST parameters in JavaScript. So if you want, you can send here. So this also, that means you are sending default arguments and you are sending custom arguments. You can pass both. But make sure that these other arguments you are collecting here, obj and this, because REST parameter must be last. The REST parameter must be last. You cannot have any parameter after the REST parameter. It must be last. Suppose button have an ID, btn details. You want to collect that ID, then you can access button ID. Button ID. How you collect the button ID? We access obj dot what ID. That means through that we can access the button detail and display. You can have both custom arguments as well as default arguments. So these are event related arguments. You can access by using spread or you can access by using REST. Syntactically, so you have a function and you have some details. It is a REST approach. And we have a button on click. Details. Here you can pass some number, some details like this. Array, object, just roughly I am giving. Any kind of details you can pass. So that example I will just roughly copy there. You can pass default arguments along with custom arguments. You can pass default arguments along with custom arguments. This is the major part about events actually, because at React level, when you are building an application, everything depends on these event arguments, how you manage, how you deal, because data transporting is primarily done by using this. So these plays very key role in React. That's the reason you must have complete perfect idea on what are event arguments, how they are managed by JavaScript. So now you are aware of event handler. another event listener, another one event arguments. Here one problem is there, and that is what major is actually. What is the problem is, so you need to, I will give this example first, just for your understanding. Remember, these are all your HTML, JavaScript examples. Because once you get clarity here, we can use this in React now. Now, what is another important note is, I hope this you learnt already in JavaScript, that event listener will not support, will not support, event listener will not support different types of arguments, will not support different types of arguments. It implicitly, it implicitly uses only a reference for event. It implicitly uses only a reference for event. Hence, only one parameter is allowed in listener, which can access both event and element details, which can access both event and element details. So what is the point about arguments is, generally event handler, event handler is here, event handler, this event handler is passing arguments. What are those arguments? This event, that means event handler is passing this and event and custom arguments also. If there is no handler, how you will send information about button? Because we saw that event listener is dynamically added. We don't have handlers. If there is no handler, how event listener will know about that element or event? If handler is there, we will pass. In the handler, we pass three types of arguments. One is this, another one event, another one is custom. If there is no handler, if there is no handler, then how you do that? For example, the concept is simple. You just have a button, and what we are doing here, on body load, on load, body load, we will write a function body load. When body load, document dot query selector, we are accessing button, and to that button we want to add event, and we are using what? Add event listener. What is the event name? Event name is click, and it uses a callback function. This is a callback function. Now there is no handler, then how you pass arguments? There is no handler. Here it is having ID, BTN details, and details. It is having name as details something. How you collect these details now? There is no handler, only listener is there. Then how you access the details? So this event function allows only one argument. It allows only one argument, that is formal argument. You can give any name, you can give any name, but it refers to which? It refers to event. You give any name, xyz, anything, it refers to event argument. But event argument can collect only information about the event, it cannot collect information about element, but this can collect both. That means what event can do is you can access event.clientX, you can access event.control key, and you can access event.target.id name value like that. Event.target.name like this. Target is used to get information about the element. Generally, in event handler, two separate arguments are present, one for element, another for event. But in event listener, only one will be there. Then how you access element details, how you access event details. Event details are accessed directly. Element details are accessed by using another object called target. So that means this target refers to the button. This button, it refers to this button. Button related information it can access. Event related information also it can access. It can access both. So handler needs two default arguments and listener needs only one. React follows this mechanism. So React follows this mechanism. That's the reason first you should know what is a listener and how listeners work. That means now how do you collect the details? You see document.write. So I want as X position. How to get X position? E dot client X. I want to get the button ID. How do you get the button ID? E dot target dot ID. We can access like that. That means when I click this, it should get those details. But this time there is no event handler. So we have to get through event listener. And here there is no chance of custom arguments. There is no chance of custom arguments. You cannot pass any custom arguments. Here there is no place because it allows only one argument. What is it? Event. You cannot pass custom arguments. Then how do I pass my own data? For that, we have to implement other techniques. Through other techniques, we can pass the data. What is the technique? In next level, you will learn. How do you pass your own data? But initially, there is no scope of any custom arguments. Here, you cannot pass any custom arguments. Listener have only one. What is it? Default argument. Suppose custom arguments, that means can we pass any custom argument here? We cannot pass because actually this is a formal parameter. Where you are passing the value, you are not passing value, you are just collecting it. You are not passing any value. These are formal. There is no place for actual. Actual values are coming from the implicitly, internally coming. Then we have to implement other techniques to manage custom arguments. So one important thing you should know. So syntactically, we have a document dot query selector. Suppose we have a button. Button usually have so button, so query selector button have a add listener. Into that click and we have a function. This can have only one argument. E dot client y, E dot control key, E dot target dot ID, E dot target dot name, like that. Event handler, event listener, event arguments, events. You cannot crack any React interview without knowing these words, because out of 100 React interviews will ask you all this. That's the reason many people are overconfident about their React knowledge and go to React interviews and they fail. Because in React interviews, 90% questions are JavaScript, very in depth. And you think that you know general JavaScript by just knowing 2-3 events and functionalities. That will not work out in React. You should have very in-depth, complete knowledge of JavaScript to deal React like technology, even to crack interviews. Very in-depth, because React developer means they think he is genius in JavaScript. They think, right? You should also prove that. So the point here is almost all React interviews, these questions are common, even at experience level. So that's the reason we should be aware of all these questions. So these are all JavaScript questions. So I hope you are clear. Event, event handler, event listener, and what event arguments. Arguments. How do we deal with event arguments? I will give an example of this one. These examples are just for your reference and refreshing the JavaScript points. Now, next important question here is, another important question is, what is event propagation? How to prevent propagation? This is another popular question in interviews. What is event propagation and how you prevent event propagation? It's a general concept of events you will face. Whenever you are designing events, you will face this kind of issues. Event propagations are very common in JavaScript. What is event propagation and how to prevent event propagations? That's a common approach actually. For example, suppose what is event propagation is, so we have a nav bar and we have a button. So this is search and this is heading Amazon. Okay. Now what happens is, just for your understanding sake, background color black. So color is white. Padding is 20 pixel. Okay. I'm just adding some design. This is the design. Now what happens is, this is actually nav bar. Nav bar have an on click. This is nav click. And this is a search button have an on click. That is search click. Okay. So we have script. We have two functions. One is nav click. On this, we will put an alert nav bar clicked. Okay. And we have a function search click and search click. And we have an alert as search button clicked. That's good. So now what happens is, I am clicking on nav bar anywhere and it says nav bar click. That's good. When I click on search button, it says search button click. And I say okay, it says nav bar also click. But that cannot happen. But it happens. Why? Because you kept a button in a nav bar and you push the button, nav bar also push. Obviously, it simulates the nav bar. That means what happens is, the child elements, you may not have designed like this anytime. That's your problem if you haven't designed. But in real time, there are so many situations like this. If you haven't designed like this, you haven't learned this, that's your problem. Why? Because that's, you don't know that in general this kind of design is very common, and this problem is very common. This is called propagation. Propagation means why navbar is clicking when I click only search. That means when I click search, why navbar is also triggered. It should trigger only when I click navbar. Right? This is called propagation. Propagation is a problem that regularly comes when child and parent elements both have events. When parent element has have event, child element have an event. This is very common because when you learn about data grids, presenting data in a grid style, you will learn you present data in rows and columns, and grid have events. In that rows columns, some buttons like delete, insert, they also have events. When you click the button, table event also fires, because in a table you kept a button, and when you click the button will fire up and table also fire up its events. That cannot happen. So what is event propagation? Event propagation is a mechanism where the child event triggers the parent. We should stop. We should stop. That means when user clicks on search, it should stop the propagation to its parent. Then how do you stop the propagation? What you have to do is, so for this, you have to pass an event argument, search button. You have to collect an event argument, and event argument have a method called stop propagation. You have to use the method stop propagation. So through event argument stop propagation method, you can stop the propagation of the child event to its parent. So that is how you have to do. But how to send the event related details we send by using what? Event. Through event you can send the event details. In event details there is a method called stop propagation. If you use this method, this event will stop here only. That event will stop there. It will not allow that event to continue to its parent. If you don't do this, it will continue to its parent. That means when you click search, after search it will click now. It should stop here itself. It should not simulate the parents. Usually it will do. It simulate the parent. Now you see, I click now, now bar is clicked. I click search, then search button is clicked, and now bar not clicked. That means we are stopping the propagation. If you remove this stop propagation, then when I click search, then search button is clicked and now bar also clicked. And we don't want that to happen. So stop propagation. That is very important. How you stop the propagation, right? That is very basic thing, right? What is event propagation? It is a mechanism where the child event triggers its parent element events. Its parent element events. So child element simulates the event that triggers parent events. You can prevent propagation of event, of child event. You can prevent propagation of child event by using the event argument And what is the event argument method? Stop propagation.
Hey, so how are you? Doing good.
By using event argument
So what are
method,
you?
stop propagation.
Actually, I was not online like at this moment. So what's going on?
Syntactically.
No. Like right now, I'm
So
not applying the
function
codes we are
child
right now.
will have an event argument. That's how we need to define.
Like find out how to apply and like mostly the jobs are it's in the metro cities. Like you can see the locations
So
with the
event
like
propagation and the
training
child.
that mentioned in the description of the job.
Actually, this
So this
mechanism
get
people
confused,
also
right?
call as event bubbling.
Like
In some
for applying
situations, people
so
use the
mostly
word
those
event
jobs
bubble.
like walk-in interviews are there.
Event bubbling is
So
nothing
if you
but
are living
we
in a
have
metro
a
city, so you
parent
can
bubble,
attend one
child
of the
bubble.
interviews
How you will blow out the child bubble? You press the
see
parent,
how the things are going on.
then without the parent, the child will not bubble. That means, for example, bubbling is nothing but this is a parent bubble. Inside
I
that,
get it. Like, because
we
of
have a
something we are
parent
providing
bubble.
in
So inside
particular
that, there
stages
is
we
a
are
child
providing
bubble.
and sorry of jobs and
How
later
you
they will
touch the child
like
now?
if you are taking permission like I want to continue from
How you touch
home.
the child?
There are
Through the
maybe
parent
there are
only.
chances they will allow you to continue.
And obviously, you are touching this
Yeah,
child means
people are
directly. Then automatically, parent also
starting
affects.
so I think it's little bit okay. But
That
I
means,
have
for
seen some
example, you are
vacancies are
using a touch
just for
screen. To
girls.
touch screen,
Some
what
kind
you
of posts
can
I have
do,
seen
you
that
can
is only for
directly
boys.
point on the
And
child. Then
locations are there,
obviously, it will
locations are
touch the
there.
parent.
Wednesday can do from we can do from
Internally, it
there.
uses a mechanism called event bubbling.
Sports are there
So
to
that's the
us.
reason in some interviews they may ask what is event bubbling, which is same event propagation. It's not a different concept.
Yeah,
So that
we
means
can
it
use
is
like daily
also referred
whereas
as.
maybe for remote jobs.
So event propagation. So propagation is a mechanism. So which is often referred as event bubble. So you are touching a child means
It's starting as like
automatically, unknowingly, the
but if
parent
you
is touched.
click in
There
the
is no chance
particular
that
like for
without
example
touching the
it says
parent, you touch the child.
walk-in interviews today.
So
So
that
I
is the
click
event
on the
bubbling
link. So
mechanism.
after scrolling, the same page will come.
You may think
But
like you are directly
again, you will
clicking that
scroll little bit.
search
You will
button,
scroll
but actually you
up.
are
Then you will get the
clicking through
links
the
for your
parent.
daily
Through parent only you have to
walk-ins are
go.
there.
That's the reason
So
internal it works.
so it's little
You
bit
have to
confusing.
prevent that.
You just need to scroll
Example I will
up.
copy here. This is the
Then you get
example of that event propagations, how
I think
you
starting
handle
I
it.
also completed about
Next,
how to
another
make a screenshot
important while
while
working
while
with
in
the
the
events is
meetings.
how to disable the default generic functionalities of elements. How to disable the
Actually,
default
I
generic
for example,
functionality of
let me
elements.
see.
That is also a very big problem which you need to resolve every time.
Actually, I find there is one
How
WhatsApp
to disable the
group also for the same.
default generic functionality of elements. That is also related to event. Disable default generic functionality is nothing but, for example, what is this concept is, suppose we are having a form. In a form, we have username.
See, like for example,
Input type is
you
equal to text, name is uname.
and like fresher
Okay.
recruitment are there.
And we
So when
have
you
a
click on the
button called
apply,
submit.
so first it will open one
Now
site.
we are writing submit on click.
See,
On click is
and when you
submit
scroll up,
click.
so you
Submit
will
click.
scroll up, and then you
And
will
we
get
have a
your
function
name like
called
that.
submit
Job
click.
position Bangalore, technical job position is technical
On
associate,
submit click, we
job
will put
location
an alert
software,
as form submitted.
freshers qualification
Okay.
B, BCA,
Somewhere we are submitting the form to form submitted to server. Okay, fine. Now, usually, what is problem in this is you entered some name and you clicked on
and
submit
yeah, there
button.
is also where one link
This
how to apply.
button is
So
present in a form,
simply you can click apply for this
and
job
you know that
in the below you can
generally
see
you
apply
already know
for.
in
So just click on
HTML
that.
button have
Then I
three
think it is
types. Button
connected
type is submit, it have
apply
reset,
online. There is
am I
one
right?
option also.
And it have button.
It's
Button have three
another
types. Na? What is the default type? Default type is submit. If you don't give any type for button, by default it is a submit button.
see
If you want, you can make it as a button or you can make it as a reset. What is the point about submit and reset? These are generic functionality. Submit and reset are generic functionalities. Generic means what? By default, they have some work. Even you don't write the event, by default, they have a event. That means, for example, you see, for example, I am not writing submit click. I am not writing any submit click. I am not writing any submit click. And you enter some name and click on submit. Then by default, it have submit functionality. It is submitting the data. I haven't written any event, but by default, some event is working. How to disable this?
While if, for example, I was not here, I was at my home.
How to disable the default functionality and define our own functionality? That is the question, right? How to disable the default functionality? Now see what happens here. Already button, submit button have a work. I given one extra work. Now what happens? It will do both. It will do the work I given, form submitted to server, and it will do its internal work also. But this must stop, because when I return some functionality, do only that. Don't do your work internally. But these buttons have internally some work. Already they are defined with that functionality and they do it. And we don't want it to happen. That is a very common question. How you stop this? That means we don't want these generic buttons to do their work. We want them to do only the work given by us. Then usually what we do is generally how you configure this. So usually what happens is by default they have this buttons for form. I hope you know we don't write button on click. What you write? Generally for form you write an event called what? On submit. For forms you know how to deal with the events. That is what? Submit click. That means now what happens is this button have two works. It will do its work, internal its work also done. We have to stop the internal work. Then what you do? We have to pass an event, and through that event we have to use a method called prevent default. That is the method of JavaScript. Stop propagation is one method, and prevent default is another method. What prevent default method will do? it will not allow, it will not allow the default functionality to happen. Any default functionality is there, it will stop. It will allow only the
And sometimes
functionality
it will
defined by
load
you.
also while
In
while
HTML,
execution.
submit buttons, reset buttons, forms, they have their own functionality. We don't want. We want our own functionality to write. In that case, we have to use prevent default. That means now what happens? I am writing
Actually,
something here.
I have
I
like
entered some
like
David
from
and
class
click
one to
submit.
class
It
five,
says submitted and
I
OK. The
completed my
default functionality stop.
education in CBSE board, and
It
later
is
on
not
I
submitting.
completed my from 9th class to 12th
What
class,
work you
12th
given,
class
only it will do it.
state board
It will
exam,
not do any default work.
and later
So
on
how
my
this is
MSc
possible?
also like bachelor in English.
So this possible. So by using,
Like I am not, like my family background is
by
not,
using
this kind
event
this
argument
environment there
method,
in my family also there is nothing at all.
prevent default.
But yeah,
By using event argument method, prevent default. Prevent default is the method.
actually I never spoke in front of my family members. So it's also, I think they did not have seen me to speak
So
spoken English.
syntactically, suppose we have a function.
Even mostly
This
I
function
have
is form
been
submit
outside in
function. If it is a form submit
like
function, e
I
dot
have spoken one time
prevent default.
one of my brother. Yeah, because maybe for them they talk in English, so it's kind of fun for them why you're talking English. They are not, yeah, they are not actually in this language.
Form is having a button inside. So this is the
They're not
submit
making fun
button.
if I talk English, something like that. See, for example, if I'm talking like I live in with my village, sorry, in my village or with my family, I started talking daily English. So maybe they are also getting habitual of it. Yeah, the first time maybe they will solve the other why he's talking English. Yeah, usually we have seen the village, if we are in the village and we are, outside, we are going for walking, and for example, we just talk in English. So the persons who
Right.
are along with us, maybe they will say,
So these are all event
what's the need to
related
talk English?
basics. So
Why this
JavaScript
showing?
event
They'll
related
say that
basic
you don't
concepts are
have to
all
show
these.
off all this kind of thing.
Now, one more thing you learned in JavaScript is, for example, we have on click. So this
So you
on
had your
click
snacks or
belongs to which
sometimes you
element?
usually have some snacks like tea, coffee.
On click belongs to which element?
Actually, yeah,
It
I
is an event. Event belongs to
actually
window.
the time is also about
It is not related to button
we have
or
to
any
like
element.
after
All
like
events are related to window. They are not, they are not related to button.
yeah,
You just saw that
yeah,
we written
like
click for navbar also.
sambar is like in the
You
like
can right click
then
for
we
a
have to
div
put
span also. You
sambar
can right click for
rice is
a
always there, rice
button, div, span, heading, paragraph, anywhere. Click doesn't belong to elements. Click
eggs,
belongs to
boiled eggs, they
window.
will boil. Unfortunately, I have
JavaScript have a
experienced,
browser
so I
object
got
called window. All
exit.
events belong to this window. And window is a
So
DOM object.
yeah, today is at
So
least
React cannot
lecture
use
on
these
the
events. React is virtual DOM. It's not actual DOM. So React cannot use the JavaScript events. Then how React uses the events?
you are non-vegetarian.
So React cannot use these events because all these events are belonging to DOM.
But in my
So
life, everyone eats chicken apart from
React uses synthetic events. synthetic events.
media from my childhood.
Synthetic events. These are important in
That
React
time
now.
I was not aware because I'm little bit
That
biased
means
with my
events usually belong to generally
I'm not
events
concerned in our
in
doing
JavaScript
smoking or methodology. Then I stopped
belong to
actually
browser window object.
actually I
Window
tried
object. Events in JavaScript
I
belong
tried
to
to
browser window object.
also they are listening
So
to the
React cannot use
what is that
the browser
there is
events
one channel on
directly.
Sarman TV on Free Disk TV. So there are some Bhagavad Gita,
So React
some kind of
have
shows are always going on like Anupa Charma.
synthetic events,
They also
synthetic events library.
कौन है टी शर्ट से तुझे रवा आइए रे
Synthetic events library,
complain करो police station
which provides events for virtual DOM, which provides events for
टी शर्ट सर
virtual DOM
टी शर्ट सर what t-shirt can do
that map to actual DOM events.
so in your family everyone eats
So actual DOM means they look same. Actual DOM and virtual DOM events look same. We have on click, that is actual DOM. On click, this is virtual DOM. On change, and this is on change, like this. On blur, we have like on blur. Here only capitalization changes. That means same names are there. Not only capitalization, some event spellings names will change. So they will not be same name also. Some names change. Majority names are same. Some names will change. This is just only example. What is the difference you found here? Capitalization, camel case, click. If you write like this on click in React, they don't work. You have to write on click. These are virtual DOM events and we call them as what? Synthetic events. So in React, whatever the event you write is a synthetic event. It is using actual DOM event. For example, just roughly I will show here, which we already written in previous point. You see, I written on change. Some roughly I written on change. Let's right click and go to definition. On change is an event. Where is this definition is not there. It is JSX, right? It is unable to load the definition. Okay, now you see on change is coming from change event handler. Okay, right click and go to definition. Change event handler is coming from event handler. Right click and go to definition. Event handler is extending synthetic event. It is extending synthetic event. You know, extending means in JavaScript, extends is a inheritance mechanism. It is inheriting that class so that it can use it. So all events are derived from synthetic events. JavaScript events are directly browser events. React events are not browser events. They are what? Synthetic events. So in React, whatever you use are synthetic events. Then in synthetic events, some rules are changing. Means some syntaxes will change. They are not like JavaScript browser events. Small change, almost everything same. Only 5% changes in synthetic events. Those you need to know now. That we'll see in next session. Tomorrow we will do that. All today's session is about JavaScript events. In JavaScript, generally what you have to know about events I given. Now we will see how it is different in synthetic events. That we will see in tomorrow's session. In React, how we write event handlers, event listeners, event arguments, event propagation, event prevent default in React, how we define them. That we will see in tomorrow's session. Okay, right.